This week, Statistics South Africa, in partnership with the United Nations, held the 9th Global Forum on Gender Statistics that painted a rather bleak picture despite some progress made. Meanwhile, the BEE Commission, or BBEE Commission, also reflected on its 2022 report on social statistics, as well as statistics, or we are now joined, I'm sorry about that, we are now joined by Statistics South Africa's Chief Director, and of course that is Solly Molayi. Thank you so much for joining, and we do have online with us Dr. Maria Nonyana-Mokabane. Thank you for your time this afternoon. Solly, I think let's start the conversation with you. Every time I am with the Stats General, Risinga Maluleka, he says your job is not to get emotional over the data, but to really just give us figures. Yeah. I think start us off by just giving us an overview of what came out of the 9th edition of this forum, what really was dug into when it comes to gender equality. Okay.
Thank you so much for inviting us, and thank you to welcome to, good evening, good day, sorry, to the viewers. So we had a global forum, as you've indicated, and we brought about 240 data producers and data users coming from 57 countries, 17 international agencies. The theme, it was about care economy, and we're looking at how best we can actually measure what we care the most. COVID-19 have showed us that care economy, it is a very important economy. Yeah. And if you look at care economy, I'm not going to bother you with a definition, so I'm going to make it a little bit more easy. So care economy is divided into two parts. There's a care economy that is the paid economy. That's your doctors, your nurses, they're getting paid for doing the work that they're doing. But there's an unpaid care work, which is the area that we are not measuring it. So the theme around care economy was around unpaid care workers. So if you look at what we have done so far, especially in the context of South Africa, we managed to run a survey that actually looked at how much time do you spend. So let me give you some numbers. If you look at women, they spend 75% performing unpaid work. So, for example, yourself, because you are here, the work that you're doing here, we can account for the time that you are here, and we know how much you are contributing to the GDP. But there's another work that they're doing, cooking, looking after the young ones, preparing uniforms. That work is not accounted for. So we're trying to see how best we can actually measure that part and actually see how best we can actually, as you know, next to get releasing the GDP numbers, if you look at the GDP numbers, that means that it is not being regarded as being productive. And it's 75% of your time is actually doing that activity. So some colleagues around the world, if you look at Colombia and Morocco also, they've already done a sterling work around this, trying to see how they can actually account and measure unpaid work activities and also putting it into the GDP to say this is the contribution. Unpaid work mostly are females. And again, in South Africa, if you look at the living arrangement for children, majority of children are living with mothers. It's only less than 5% who are living with fathers. Already it gives you an indication. If you look at also numbers, 40% are living with either their parents, meaning they're living with grannies and grandfathers. So those set up on its own, it already tells you that we need to focus on the care economy. And I think that's the reason why we brought these international colleagues to come and help us to share. And also within the continent itself, our continent is a continent that actually has its own dynamics. And this also on its own, it also gives us a sense of what's happening in Burundi, what is happening in Senegal, and then also what is happening also within the SADC.
Yeah, and Solly, we'll circle back on how to measure that care economy, because I'm very curious on who should be paying me for that 75% care work that I do. Dr. Maria, I think let's bring you in here, just reflecting on the BBEE Commission's report for 2022 that really looked at gender equality, but more in context of who owns the economy. Could you give us a little bit more detail around that and why it's so important when it comes to the gender equality conversation information to understand who owns the economy?
Okay. The report actually, it revealed that black women ownership only accounts for almost half of the overall black ownership for a period of 6 years. That's between 2017 to 2022. And in other instances, black women ownership has been less than half of the overall black ownership in the years 2017 rather to 2022. In a sense, the gap between black women ownership and the overall black ownership has persisted over time since the establishment of B-BBEE as a commission, as a regulator. There has been stagnation, I must say, between 2022 to 2022, and the report clearly picks that up in relation to having black women ownership. In a sense, the movement that we have only made is from 14% upwards. We can only really account for a move of 5%. And we are not really happy with that. Yes, we are moving, but at a snail pace. Hence, we had to gather, put all key role players for us to can see how should we maybe use what we already have, the policies, the legislation, make sure that we mainstream women's economic empowerment through the B-BBEE legislation. I think we need to really redirect and make sure that we focus and give support so that we are able to really target our resources where it matters.
And I think just a question for both of you. Time is, not on our side, but I think, Solly, the data that comes out of Stats SA is vital in supporting stakeholders to make the right policy, make the right strategies, and so on. Talk us through then just the role that reliable data still has to play in really figuring out where we are with achieving gender equality.
Okay. No, thank you so much. If you look at our strategic plan, we're saying we want to have a data ecosystem, and through data ecosystem we want to improve the life of South Africans. So already tells you that our business is to provide quality data statistics and inform policies. We brought the DG from the Department of Women and Persons with Disability because we value our stakeholders. So what we are doing constantly is trying to get feedback from the stakeholders, especially the policymakers. What are the new themes that are emerging that we need to measure? Yes, we're having a challenge in terms of our financial constraints. That's one of the reasons why we had this forum, because we also look at what are innovative ways that we can come up with to look at how we can improve and also measure reliable and quality data. So one of the things that I need to mention, Tokoza, is that we are also looking at our program, the survey program, to see how best we can also revamp it and re-engineer it, and also see what we can bring technology, because we were speaking about technology earlier on. How can we bring technology into the fore to try and bring reliable data constantly? Because if you look at our leg in terms of providing you guys with data, we take a year, sometimes take 3 months, but we want to shorten it up so that South Africans can have data, reliable data, at the go. And also mine into the admin data sources that are available across the government department. That will also complement our normal surveys that we are conducting.
And that's true, of course, for data such as unemployment and GDP numbers as well. Dr. Maria, from the BBEE Commission's point of view, the role that you play in really shaping policy around gender equality. Yeah, maybe let me just start with looking at data, how critical data is for us. We appreciate and also acknowledge that economic change cannot come about through political works. Economic change cannot come about only through enactment of those laws and policies. Neither can it come about through judicial enforcement of these laws and policies. We are acknowledging the fact that we need a policy that will give us a visual way to communicate what I would call a plan and also a strategy. In a sense, we need a program of action to implement our policy. So need that to implement our very legislation. And apart from that, we'll be able to take from the policy
and maybe we look at collaborative ways where we can engage in concerted but also sustained efforts with implementers in government, implementers in agencies, in state institutions, so that we are able at least together tackle the problem. Policy can only lead us through the maze on how to go about in ensuring that there is indeed economic transformation with a particular target on women.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Maria, for your time. And of course, I think we'll have to have this conversation once again. It's really, time just flew by. And of course, that was Solly Molayi, the Chief Director for Social Statistics and Statistics South Africa, as well as the Chair of the Interagency and Experts Group on Gender Statistics. We also had Dr. Maria Nonyana-Mokabane, who is the Chief Director for Legal and Special Projects at the B-BBEE Commission.